The moment your door closes behind you, the yard changes. Not immediately. There is a pause, the kind that settles over a space when something that altered it is gone. The blue jay on the oak branch watches your car reverse down the driveway. The house sparrows beneath the feeder hold still. For a few seconds, the yard is suspended between two versions of itself. Then you are gone, and it becomes something else entirely. What happens in your yard when you are not there is among the least discussed findings in behavioral ornithology and among the most consistently observed. The birds that visit your feeders, the ones that seem to wait for you at the window each morning, do not wait when you leave. They work. They compete, negotiate, cache, map, and run a communication network about threats and social standing that your presence suppresses in ways most people never get to see. The yard you tend is also a yard they govern. When you leave, the governing begins. The American crow knows the exact moment your house goes quiet. The black-capped chickadee has been tracking your schedule for weeks. The blue jays at your morning feeder have a dominant structure playing out in your yard that resets when your door opens and resumes the moment it closes behind you. If this is already changing how you think about what's outside your window, hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps. And drop a comment telling me which birds visit your yard most often. I love knowing who I'm talking to. You have probably felt the edge of this without naming it. You step back inside from the porch and glance through the kitchen window 2 minutes later and find the yard completely different from how you left it. The feeder overwhelmed, birds arriving faster than usual, what looks like a dispute settling itself at the seed tray. You come home to find the suet stripped, the peanut feeder emptied, the birdbath churned in a way that suggests something was contested there. Something was going on. You just were not there to see it. What was going on is more specific than most people ever find out. Your yard, for the birds that use it, is not a station for eating. It is a territory. A shifting, actively maintained, socially layered territory with rules, hierarchies, ongoing disputes, and negotiated boundaries, none of which are stable, and all of which the birds are working on at any given moment. Your feeder is not a neutral amenity sitting inside that territory. It is a resource at the center of a competition that has been running since the first bird in your yard found it. Every bird that uses your yard holds a position in that competition. Every arrival, departure, and call from the tree line is a move in a negotiation you have never fully been able to observe. Your presence is a factor in that negotiation, a real one. Birds adjust their behavior around humans in ways that go deeper than most people realize. Not because they perform for you, but because you are a variable in their environment that has to be accounted for. A large, mostly predictable creature whose appearance alters the social math of the yard every time it happens. Researchers studying what they call flight initiation distance, the threshold at which a bird decides a human has gotten close enough to require a response, have documented that individual birds calibrate this measurement based on repeated exposure to specific people. Your birds have already worked out how close you can get before they shift their behavior. They have done the same calculation for your partner, your neighbor, the person who delivers packages to your door. Each person gets a different number. Each number was earned through observation. The effect varies by individual and species. A crow that has been visiting your yard for 3 years has a measurably lower flight initiation threshold for you specifically than for anyone it has not encountered before. A cardinal that arrived at your feeder this season is running a higher baseline weariness until enough exposure brings it down. But even the most comfortable bird in your yard, the one that feeds 3 feet from the glass without pausing, is a bird that has accounted for you in its behavioral math. It is not oblivious to you. It is comfortable with you. There is a difference, and that difference shows in what happens the moment you step away. When you are outside, certain behaviors are suppressed. When you are inside but visible at the window, others are muted. Your absence is the only condition under which the full social world of your yard operates without adjustment. Most people understand their yard birds through a frame that is reasonable and incomplete. The birds come to eat, they leave, they come back. Some dominate, some wait. The cardinal chases the sparrows. The blue jay clears the tray and everyone else holds. You have read the surface of the social world at your feeder and built a working theory. That theory is built on something real. The problem is that it was built from observations made under conditions that filter out the most complex behaviors your yard birds engage in. A bird sharing space with a human, even a human it has assessed and largely habituated to, is a bird with some portion of its social behavior moderated. It is doing what it needs to do while managing a mammal in the environment. It is not operating freely. The moment you leave, what gets released is not a more relaxed version of what you have been watching. It is the real social world of your yard, the full version of the behavior that scales back whenever a human is present. The chickadee you watch moving through the feeder for 3 seconds has a relationship with every other chickadee in your yard that plays out in real detail when you are not there to shorten the scene. The cardinal you see alone at the feeder each morning has territorial disputes happening in your yard that the sight of you near the window pauses. The crow that glances at you from the oak before moving on does something when you are gone that most people who feed birds have never seen. What they do, specifically which behaviors surface in your absence, which disputes resolve, which resources get claimed, and how, is where the science of residential bird behavior gets genuinely surprising. And for anyone who has been tending a yard with the idea that they understand what happens there, what that science describes is worth sitting with. The concept that ties this together has a name in behavioral ecology: the audience effect. When an animal knows or suspects it is being observed, its behavior shifts in measurable ways. The finding was initially documented in relation to predators. An animal watched by a threat behaves differently than one that believes it is alone. But research over the past 3 decades extended this in a direction that changes how you read your own yard. Birds respond to the audience of a human the same way they respond to the presence of a competitor or a risk. Your presence at the window is registered. Your absence is registered. The behavioral difference between those two states is not subtle. The clearest evidence comes from research on corvid caching. A California scrub jay will spend considerable time in a yard hiding food, pressing seeds into soil, tucking them under bark, storing them in locations it intends to return to when the immediate source is gone. This behavior requires the bird to form a spatial memory of every cache location, track how long ago each cache was made. Certain foods spoil faster than others, and the birds account for this in their retrieval timing and return to the right spot at the right moment without any external cue to guide it. What researcher Nicola Clayton and her team at Cambridge found is that scrub jays cache differently depending on who is watching. A jay that was observed by another bird while caching will return later and move the food, specifically to protect it from the bird that saw where it went. A jay that cached without an audience does not move anything. The bird is tracking who saw what and adjusting its behavior based on that information. The decision to relocate is not a fear response, it is a social one. The jay knows the other bird knows, and it responds to that knowledge. This runs through your yard every single day. Blue jays at your feeder while you are nearby eat, blue jays at your feeder when they believe they are alone cache. The sunflower seeds disappearing faster than you can account for on the Tuesday you worked late are not going to other birds. They are going into the ground at the base of your oak, pressed into the soil near the fence line, tucked into a location the jay will return to in February when the feeder is frozen over and the ground is bare. You have been funding a private food storage operation without knowing it was happening. If you're finding this helpful, please subscribe and turn on notifications. I upload new videos every week, and I'd hate for you to miss one. Your support is what makes this channel possible, and it genuinely means the world to me. The audience effect shapes almost every category of behavior your yard birds engage in. What actually happens in a yard with no humans present is a place running at full capacity. A social, territorial, communicating environment that has been operating just beneath the surface of everything you have been observing. The feeder is where the shift is most immediately visible. Arrival rate climbs. Visit duration extends. Species that maintain careful spacing from each other when a human is nearby begin to tolerate tighter overlap at the seed tray. Tracking feeder use with remote cameras in residential yards, researchers at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology have documented that some species show visit durations 2 to 3 times longer in the absence of human activity than during periods of regular human presence. The birds are not simply more relaxed, they are allocating more time to eating because the portion of their attention previously spent monitoring the human is freed up for food. What you see when you glance out the window after stepping back inside is not coincidental busyness. It is the feeder operating at its actual capacity. Territorial behavior is the layer beneath that. Male northern cardinals maintain a territory that extends well beyond your yard, and its boundaries are actively contested with neighboring males on a near-daily basis. The song you hear from the cardinal each morning is partly a declaration and partly an ongoing negotiation with every other male whose territory shares a border with his. That negotiation, with its counter-songs, brief aerial chases, and precise boundary flyovers, is suppressed in the area directly around your house when you are a visible presence. When you are gone, it moves closer in, The territorial work the cardinal was doing at the edges of your property shifts toward the feeders, the bath, the nesting shrubs. The boundaries are being maintained in your yard while your car sits in the lot at work. The bird bath tells a different part of the story. Birds are at their most vulnerable during bathing. Flight is compromised. Attention is split between the water and the surrounding environment, and the bird's feathers lose some of their insulating function during a full session. You already know the moment. The door closes. You're in the car, or inside at the kitchen table, or upstairs where the yard is no longer visible. And behind you, the world you just left does something you have never been there to watch. What you know now that you didn't know before is that the yard you've been tending has never needed you to be watching it to be fully alive. The blue jay was caching before you started filling the feeder. The cardinals were contesting the territory before you planted the native shrubs. The chickadee flock was running its dominance hierarchy in the trees at the back of the property before you knew what a chickadee flock hierarchy was. Your yard did not become something when you started paying attention to it. It was already something. Your attention changed what you understood about it, not what it was. That is the reframe worth sitting with. The birds that return to your yard, the ones you recognize at the feeder, the ones that seem to notice when you appear at the window, are not returning because they perform for you. They are returning because your yard holds something for them that operates independently of your presence. The cache under the oak, the territorial boundary at the fence line, the bath that runs at full capacity every morning after you leave. They come back because the yard works for them in ways that happen whether you are there to see them or not. They have been making that assessment every single day. Research on feeder site fidelity, the tendency of birds to return to specific yard locations year after year, shows that resource reliability is among the strongest drivers of long-term return. A yard with consistent food, clean water, and cover becomes encoded in a bird's spatial memory as a location worth defending and coming back to. In the case of corvids and several songbird species, it also becomes a location worth communicating about. A reliable yard gets shared through the social foraging networks that American crow banding studies have now documented. The birds your yard attracts this year are partly the result of information passed through birds that visited last year. You are building something with a longer arc than any single morning at the feeder. The honest part of that long view is that you cannot see most of what makes your yard worth returning to. The caching that happens when you leave, the territorial negotiations that shift closer when your car is gone, the bathing sequences, the flock dynamics, the Corvid problem-solving at the baffles. You will catch the edges of it sometimes. The stripped suet, the churned bath, the feeder that went from full to empty in 3 hours on a Tuesday you were away. But the full picture of what your yard is does not fit through a kitchen window. Everything you have already been doing, the seed kept fresh, the water kept clean through winter when every other source in the neighborhood freezes, the native plants that communicate in a visual language you cannot read but every bird that lands in them can, is what makes the yard what it is. You have been tending something that operates well beyond your observation. The birds have been living in it fully. The door closes behind you. The blue jay shifts on the oak branch. The house sparrows beneath the feeder hold still for 1 second, then scatter into movement. The yard becomes what it is when you are not there. Contested, territorial, communicating, running a food storage operation and a social hierarchy you have never been able to fully watch. It was doing this yesterday. It is doing it right now. That was always what was happening. You just know it now. The cardinal that comes back every morning has assessed your yard against every alternative available to it and keeps choosing this one. The crow that glances at you from the oak before moving on has been logging your routine with the same precision it applies to every other variable in its environment. The chickadees that arrive in a group and disappear just as fast are mid-session in a social world older than your interest in watching them. They are not waiting for you. They are using what you built, and they keep coming back because it is worth coming back to. That is not a small thing. Thank you so much for being here until the very end. It means everything. If this video changed how you see the birds in your yard even a little, please share it with someone who loves nature. Check out the videos on your screen now. I think you'll love them. And subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one.